Architecture school was everything I dreamed of. I met new people, we came up with crazy ideas, I traveled and saw buildings all over the world, and I'd say it was one of the most wonderful times of my life, until reality hit. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I paid it all back in 2 years on an intern's salary. This video is sponsored by Plant a Tree with HP. We're going to talk about how they're helping Jane's Institute to stop deforestation later on in this video. Hey guys, my name is Dami and I'm an architect in beautiful Vancouver, BC. Now, some of you are going to graduate with a lot more than $50,000 in debt, and some of you will graduate with a lot less. But whatever the amount, student loans suck, and it's this black cloud that's constantly looming over your head. If you don't want to be paying thousands of dollars in interest, it's best if you pay it back ASAP. But when I was in school, I was not that financially savvy. I realized how much money I was paying in interest. For example, in Canada right now, the student loans interest rate on a fixed rate is 5.2%. I mean, 5.2% out of $50,000? That's only like $2,600, right?
No, you idiot. It's 5.2% for every year you're paying back your student loans. So if you're paying it back over 10 years, that's around $11,000.
What was actually worse was realizing that the government had actually given me more money than I needed because I was moving out of province by myself, which I used on booze, food, partying, and 3D printers. That actually made me realize a dark, twisted secret. The most important thing about the school you pick, if you're paying for your own school, is not the professors, the courses, the projects, or the reputation, but it's the cost. There's a massive cost difference between different schools, and you might think that going to an expensive school is going to give you a better job and a better pay, but think again, because all intern salary is actually in a very similar range of
Mediocre.
So, when you graduate with a $200,000 debt versus a $10,000 debt, you're actually significantly reducing your income. Paying $1,000 is very different from $500 when you're just starting out. Luckily, I figured this out before I started my master's, so two of my top criteria was cost and the speed at which I could get my degree. Because 1 or 2 extra years, that makes a huge difference in your debt. And the potential income you could be having by working. So I went back to Ryerson, which is where I went for my BArch, because they gave me an awesome scholarship. And they had a fast track program, which let me graduate in 1.5 years compared to 2 to 3 or even 3.5 years from some other programs. Throughout my master's, I worked part-time as a teaching assistant. If you can, try your best to get a job at the architecture school because it's very convenient and they pay quite well. Thanks to my smart moves, I graduated with only $50,000 in student loans. But it wasn't until I graduated that the gravity of my loans really started to kick in. And that year, I probably entered one of the lowest points in my life. $50,000 was just a massive amount for me, and I felt constantly overwhelmed with the idea of having to pay it back, especially on my tiny intern salary. It didn't help that all my friends were working while I was in school. They were all making more money than me. I'm never gonna forget that one day when I told them how much money I made. They all were shocked because, they thought that I have a bachelor's and a master's and they thought that I would be making way more money. And this put me in an even worse downward spiral. I had no motivation. I wasn't enjoying my work, and I was becoming resentful of everyone and of myself. Let me just pause for a quick moment for a message from our sponsor, HP. As an architect, I spend a lot of time reading the fine print on the environmental impact of some of the products and materials I'm specifying. I try to look at the material content and where it comes from, but also the company's manufacturing process or the recycling program. HP is a company that that's actually making a lot of strides on their sustainability agenda, not just using it as a marketing pitch. So their newest initiative is a partnership with Trees for Jane, which is an international grassroots campaign with the goal of stopping deforestation and helping communities around the world. And so all of your HP purchases from now through June is going to contribute to planting 1 million trees. If you've never heard of Dr. Jane Goodall, she's the founder of the Jane Goodall Institute, and she's also a UN Messenger of Peace. And the foundation's been doing some really amazing things, including their goal to plant 1 million trees by the end of 2022.
HP's products and their packaging contain recycled material,
like their HP Envy 7955E, which is made with 45% recycled plastic.
Their products also contain ocean-bound plastics.
They also have a recycling program where you can send back your empty cartridges and they'll recycle it for you so you know it's going to the right places. Anyways, all of your HP purchases from now through June is going to contribute to this initiative. So if you need to buy any printers or products, this is probably a good time to buy. So anyways, back to my story. There was one thing that really helped me out of this downward spiral, and that was making a plan. So first, I sat down and analyzed my debt, and I set an ideal payoff date. For me, that ideal timeline was 2 years, because that was the time that I set for myself to get my architect's license. So it was actually kind of easy for me to visualize myself in this new life, newly licensed architect with no debt. Then I used an online calculator like this one, where you can adjust the time span, and it's going to tell you how much you need to pay each month to pay it off by that day. From this, I got my number. I then scheduled in my diary to check in with myself every week to make sure that I was on track. Once I set that goal, it became very obvious that I had to do two things. I had to seriously increase my income, and I had to seriously reduce my spending. I started packing my lunch, I stopped eating out, I cut my inessential spending. But there's one thing that made the biggest dent in my spending: moving back to my parents' house. This was actually a really tough decision and a huge blow to my ego, because I've been living that independent woman life for the past 6 years, and I wasn't about to move back to my mom's house. But once I set out my plan, this was kind of a no-brainer for me. So the strategy here is to ignore your parents for 6 years, and when you come back, they're gonna be so happy. They're gonna be showering you with love and food.
Joking.
Now, I know that I'm very, very fortunate to have this, but where you live is a major contributor to your income and your cost of living. And if I didn't have this, I might have actually moved to another city where the cost of living was not so high. I would have definitely gotten a roommate. The second thing I was looking for was any areas where I could increase my income. So the first thing that I did was actually ask for a raise, and that didn't go very well. And so the next thing that I did was looking for any freelance services I could provide on the side. The problem is when you're an intern, you don't have that much experience, but there are some things that you are going to be good at. So this is when I sat down and made a list of all my strengths to try to figure out what my marketable strengths were. After an exhaustive list, I came up with 2 skills: rendering and photography. So I told everyone I knew, if you know anyone who needs renderings or photography services, I'm the one. I can do it cheap and well. So I started getting some rendering jobs here and there. I was starting to meet my monthly financial goals, but I was really working around the clock because, big surprise, I was charging too little for my services. Till one day, all of that changed. I have been working for a client who owned a pastry franchise called Stuffy's. I actually met this client through my boss at the time. A quick tip here: your firm And your bosses are actually going to be your biggest untapped resource for finding your side income. When you're an architect, and especially when you have your own firm, you get a lot of people asking you to do work that's just too small and not feasible for the firm to do, like renderings. In my case, this was my boss's old client from the days when he was an intern and freelancing. I took this on, I did the renderings, but I also did any kind of graphics or promotional banners and kind of anything and everything. And over time, I gained their trust. So one day, this Stuffy's client asked me if I could do a design for their new store at the Eden Center in Toronto. Because they're a franchise, they already have all of their design guidelines that talks about the color, font, signage, feel, atmosphere. So my job was to just adopt it for the new space and, figure out the circulation and make it functional. It's not the most interesting work for a designer, but once you do it once, it's relatively easy to do another and another and another. Of course, for construction drawings, you can charge a lot more than just doing renderings. In BC, for projects of a certain type up to a certain size, you actually don't need a licensed architect as long as you have another licensed professional like an electrical or a mechanical engineer. And actually, this is, like when you're an intern, is the perfect time for you to be doing these small projects, because once you become a licensed architect, no matter how small the project, you need to sign off on the drawings, and you can't really do that without a liability insurance or a certificate of practice, which actually cost thousands of dollars. Once you become a licensed architect, you're actually a lot more limited to what you can and you can't do. I have a video where I talk about the pros and cons of getting licensed. I'll leave it right here. So anyways, this kept happening. I would get hired to do one thing, like renderings or photography, and I'd get asked to do the design or construction drawings. As a young graduate, you might think that you don't have the skills to make side income, but you actually do. If you just keep your ears open and tell everyone you know that you're providing these services. And now you have things like Fiverr or Upwork, right? Just get into the habit of showing off your work and your skills. And once you get the job, meet deadlines, do amazing work, be responsive, be nice and pleasant to work with. Do such a good job that when they need other design services, they're gonna be like, oh wait, can you do it? So this is a very quick breakdown of how I paid off my student loans in 2 years. Yes, I was very fortunate to be able to live rent-free at my mom's, and I was lucky to work for bosses who would regularly throw work my way. But none of this would have manifested in my life if I hadn't made a concrete step-by-step plan to pay off my loans. Of course, I had months where things didn't go as planned, but when you don't have a roadmap, you're just letting your loans control you. When you set a goal and track that goal and do whatever it takes to meet that goal, you will start to see gaps and opportunities that you hadn't seen before. If you're an intern architect, one of the fastest ways you can increase your salary is to get licensed and get more letters after your name. If you're interested in learning about how I got licensed in less than 4 years of working, I'll leave the video right here. If you're not interested in that and you just want to see some cool architecture videos, I have a video on my architectural thesis. I'll leave it right here. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button and you'll get more content on career and design and creativity. If you want to get notified next time I release a new video, you can hit the notification bell. With that, I'll see you guys in the next video.